Welcome to ACP, the Amazon Connect podcast. This is the show that focuses on Amazon Connect and related technologies. I'm your host, Tom Morgan, and I'm joined as usual by my co-host, AWS Solution Architect and Contact Center Consultant, Alex Baker. We are also joined today by John Mitchem from Operata. Find out more about Cloud Interact by visiting us at cloudinteract.io. It's time for another ACP, and I'm joined as usual by Alex. Alex, how's it going?
Yeah, it's going well. Thank you, Tom. Good to talk to you. We haven't had the chance to catch up much lately, it seems.
It has been that busy that I think, literally the last time I spoke to you was recording one of these, but it's good to see you again. And we're also joined by John Mitchem, who is the co-founder and CTO of Operata? John,
let's go with
you. You go.
Yeah, let's go with Operata. Great to be here, Tom and Alex.
Cool.
Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. And thanks for making time in your schedule and with the confusing time zones to make this happen, because I know it's probably kind of either the middle of the night or certainly the evening for you. So yeah, really appreciate you making the time.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks.
Yeah, good to have you here. Thanks for joining us, John.
Sure.
So before we get into what you're doing at the moment, I think it'd be good for folks just to kind of take a step back and sort of what your history is, where you've come from and what's led you to this point.
Yeah, sure. So I've spent the last, let's say, 15 years or so, perhaps 20 years, man, it's getting on now, in contact centers for my sins. I don't know what I did in a past life, but it's led me to contact centers. And I've really been in the operational space. So I started off as a voice engineer. Actually started off as a cabler, told, and then found my way into PABX land, and then finally into VoIP, and then into contact centers. And through the course of my career, I've been fortunate enough to work all across the world and in different contact center environments for, retail and banking. Worked at some carriers as well. And so I've sort of seen a good breadth of contact center delivery, optimization, things going right, things going wrong, and certainly had my fair share of managing those voice and data network. And so that sort of led me to have a deep understanding of the problem space of that sort of plagues getting CX right, and so I left my last job at a large Australian regional bank and started Operata with an old colleague of mine from the bank and also a new founder a gentleman who's had a couple of successful startups in the past. So we joined forces and created Operata. So we've been going for about 6 years now. And so it's been a fun time.
Was it something that coincided with Amazon Connect's introduction? And it sounds like it was around a similar time. Was that coincidental, or was it a planned thing?
No, it actually was totally coincidental. So when we started, we were actually going after the load testing space. In fact, that was kind of the genesis of Operata was around load testing and, looking at how we could perhaps disrupt that market that had been led by, one particular player for quite a long period of time in the Genesis space. And we were looking at other emerging platforms and looking at how perhaps load testing could be done slightly differently. But when we started doing that and having conversations with some really early customers, it became apparent that there was a need for sort of objectivity when it came to audio quality. And so they weren't only just asking about load, but they were asking about voice quality. And that led us to a conversation with the folks at AWS. An old colleague of mine from the bank had just moved over to AWS, and he just joined the Australian Connect team. And we were having a very similar conversation to this, talking about load testing and what people are after. And he said, funny you should mention that. We've got a large telco here in Australia that, there's a lot of subjectivity around the audio quality, and it's actually blocking the deployment. Do you think you could come in and have a chat to those folks? And so I did, and we came in, and this very, very early on in the piece, no market fit yet, really. And we sort of spoke around, sure, you could do load testing, but does that actually solve the problem? What is the problem? And they were arguing around whether their old platform sounded better than the new platform, Amazon Connect. And there was some questions around the voice quality. And so we very, very quickly behind the scenes, went to like ducks swimming on the water and paddling like that.
Of course we can do this thing. Of course we can do this. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. They're easy, And we built an objective quality assessment tool based on a protocol called, or a standard called POCA, Perceptive Objective Listening Quality Assessment. And that was the sort of gold standard, modern standard for WebRTC. And our competitors were using that spec. They were using an older spec called PES, getting kind of audio nerdy, but it just wasn't cutting the mustard. And so, we implemented a tool and we're able to sort of unblock that project. And that got us chatting to the folks at AWS about sort of the wider opportunity. And then as we sort of started going down that rabbit hole, it became quite clear that, actually the tooling that large modern organizations were looking for just didn't exist. Not only was it around audio quality, but it was around the larger job of monitoring back then. And we'll get on to observability and the differences there a little later on, I'm sure. But we then moved into WebRTC monitoring. That was sort of the next step. So I was like, okay, well, we've done load testing. We've now moved in to do some audio quality assessment. We can see that these platforms are working as expected. Now, what's the next sort of step in that journey? And it really came down to the lack of observability, or the lack of monitoring in the environments, and whether this new sort of WebRTC, so just call it new, but 6 years ago, when Amazon Connect launched, it wasn't exactly widespread like it is today. And
it was a big shift, wasn't it? I suppose, from lots of on-premise networks and like very closed systems, and like a different set of protocols, a different meaning to call quality, and then WebRTC being much more distributed, I guess, and many more things that can go wrong. It's different as well, I suppose.
No, you're absolutely right, and in fact, that was the kind of core, at the very core of the issue here, is that you had large organizations that were quite well versed in SIP, and they were well versed in on-prem telephony, and still had PSDN, and some were using basic rates and primary rates and all that sort of stuff. And then they were moving to this world of, right, this black box in the cloud, absolutely no idea really what behind the wizard's curtain there. We don't manage our telephony. There isn't anything like PSDN anymore. We get these bunch of DIDs, and then it pops out on a soft phone on a browser. What could possibly go wrong? Well, a lot. A lot can go wrong. It's great in principle, and of course, it's a technology stack that's completely revolutionized telephony in the contact center, no doubt about it, as we found out in 2021, right?
Right.
But yeah, I mean, so that sort of lack of tooling around this emerging tech was actually preventing a lot of pilots to sort of span out into full scale production deployments. And so we started focusing on that. And again, like back to my history, I guess I felt this problem even on-prem, and even with the tool, the kind of stacks that I was used to back then, and SIP and standard old school telephony, there was still a lack of end-to-end monitoring. It was still a hard job to do. When things didn't go right, which was often, you did have to rely on talking to agents. They had to go off queue. You had to talk to supervisors, perhaps in the Philippines or perhaps in India, and all across the world, really. And that took time away from their day and what they were good at, and it was hard for me to do my job. It increased the time to resolve it. It was tough even then. And now we're moving into this fully managed cloud stack. I could understand why enterprise were hesitant and adoption was kind of waning. And so we really started to lean into that problem on the product base, and we haven't stopped. Yeah.
Do you think that hesitancy is driven from kind of companies feeling like they're losing control of the call quality, like the ability to influence the call quality? I wonder sometimes, like with this, do people still care about call quality as much as they did? Like, do you know what I mean? Like this stuff happens, and sometimes, I don't know, even the calls at home, you'd like WhatsApp calls or FaceTime calls, like sometimes the quality dips, and we're like, oh well, like, whereas it feels like 10 years ago, we were all aiming for like 100%. I guess is 100% achievable, and what's the sort of perception from what you're seeing kind of in the market for like how people approach call quality now?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think consumers do care a lot because it's another representation of the overall customer experience for that brand. Some would say it's the experience, especially as callers are genuinely, or typically in Strife, when they're calling a contact center, they're not calling for a good time. Let's face it.
Yep.
And so something's gone wrong. There's something complicated. There's something that can't be achieved on another digital channel, typically. And so they're using this other medium. And so they're already perhaps in a heightened state when they call a contact center. And I think that's reflective of consumer behavior to contact center agents, especially over the last 3 or 4 years. So yeah, I think they do care quite a lot. And also there's a soft side, if you want to call it that, of customer experience. And then there's the harder side of cost optimization that comes with improved call quality as well. But I think, it's really the tip of the icebergs into what customers actually care about, and customers being callers, as well as operator customers. But, people care a lot about the overall experience. So it might not necessarily be just the audio quality, but then perhaps they're, routed through to an offshore agent who is doing their very best, but can't necessarily help the customer and maybe under some unrealistic pressures from a commercial perspective. And they'll take some shortcuts, right? Onshore or offshore. I shouldn't say just offshore. It's onshore as well. Any agent. And those sort of traditional KPIs and the pressure to, reduce handle time leads to some pretty substandard behaviors. And so both on the customer side in the way that they respond to agents and on the agent side. But what you're left with then are agents pulling out some old tricks, right? So, disconnecting a call while they're on hold, or staying on mute for the first 30 seconds of the call, hoping the customer's gonna drop off. They might be taking themselves off queue and putting themselves back on queue frequently to sort of try to cheat the routing algorithm. And so that there's a few different behaviors that can be employed by an agent that's perhaps under pressure from their business to perform unrealistically.
It seems like the audio quality is almost like the absolute baseline that you kind of want to strive to, try and at least make that bit not an issue, and then deal with some of the interesting sort of agent behavior related issues that you mentioned there as well. So can the platform, obviously it can do the sort of quality monitoring side of things, but it can also do that bit around the overall customer experience and things like monitoring agent behavior as well.
Yeah, and I guess the reason I bring that up is really around the progression of not only the Operata platform, but the customer need, and where we switch from pure monitoring then into observability. And that's a sort of natural progression of the tooling. But we're also now, in terms of some of the cloud benefits, we've got access to APIs that we never used to have access to. We've got access to data streams in real time, which is never possible before. And so all of a sudden, with the right tooling and the right focus on that tooling and knowing what to look for, and using machine learning especially to kind of understand behaviors, you can start to paint a really incredible picture of not only the customer journey, but the overall customer and agent experience as well. And so, you can start to correct some of those behaviors, or actually point out to the business that perhaps some of their SLAs and their KPIs perhaps a little unrealistic, and that's in turn, forcing agents into a corner. And so, I think that's what we found to be the natural progression of pure monitoring into observability. And that stemmed from, what is now to me a pretty obvious kind of space that conversations with a customer where everything was going well. So we'd been in monitoring for, 2 months, maybe a little more. And the customer said, look, we love the tool, but it's not showing us anything special. Our contact center is great. Like, our networks are cool. They're working as expected. The VPNs, the proxies, the firewalls, the IDPs, everything's working great. We've had a couple of blips we picked up on, but aside from that, it's cool. But what else can you show us? And then in that conversation with the customer, I was like, well, here's some interesting logs that we've started to pick up on. And, not every issue is a technical issue. And as soon as I use those words, I've got the nods from around the table, and the old school telephony engineers, like, I'm saying that for years. It's often the user. It's really hard to
but you don't have the data to prove it, or like to show it, or to highlight it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so that really led us down this path of then truly understanding, one, the need for observability in the customer experience and agent experience space, and the fact that that need was unmet. So, we've been dedicated to being the best at CX observability in the same way that Datadog or Splunk or New Relic are incredible at what they do and have evolved over the years. So we've still got a way to go, but that's our path.
Is this something, so for people that are using Connect, maybe know a bit about what you do, maybe they don't, is this something that you can sort of start to get out of the box from Connect? Are there API calls for getting things like the latency metrics or other sort of audio quality metrics, or is it, you've kind of developed your own secret sauce around it?
Yeah, a little bit of both. So we do an integration using cloud formation templates and Terraform if the customer supports it. We deploy a stack into the customer's environment to help extract some of those traces, logs, and metrics. But at that point, they're just that, and those are available in CloudWatch as well. And, we certainly recommend to customers that are just dipping their toe in the water to look at those as well in CloudWatch and see what you can do out of the box. Certainly, AWS has done a great job of evolving those. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really paint a picture of the experience. It's giving you a bunch of metrics, which is useful in some circumstances, but you really do need to know, one, how to interpret those, and two, to tie them to an individual experience. And that's the hard bit. And so that's what we focus on. So it's not so much, in some cases, we generate our own special source, and we do that at the edge. We do that at the agent desktop. And in other cases, we then, collect the metrics, traces, and logs from the DCAS platform, Amazon, nice Genesis. And then we pull all that into Operata, and that's where we start to really do our magic, helping, piece that together in the overall experience and start to paint a timeline of the agent, experience and the customer's experience along that journey. And then, the job is not, as part of observability, we kind of employ a method called the OODA loop. And I think it's from the mid-70s at the US Air Force kind of methodology: observe, orient, detect, and act. And that's the way we think about the problem: observe, orient, detect, and act. And so the observe, orient, and detect is the bit that we've sort of down pat now. Now it's the acting that's really our next stage, and that's where our customers are starting to invest with Operata to I guess, explore what orchestration off the back of observability looks like, and there are some really fantastic use cases coming out that can repair broken experiences or save experiences from going down the wrong path because of the real-time nature of what we do. So some really, really fascinating orchestrations that we're starting to see, especially on Amazon Connect.
It's really interesting. And I think it'd be good to kind of bring in a discussion around AI at this point, because it feels like a lot of that, you can see some quite tangible benefits in a way that, maybe in some other sort of businesses and work streams, it's sometimes a bit of a struggle to see how AI can be applied. But actually, I think there's some real, fairly obvious, some of the things you've been saying, you can kind of see how that, the taking the knowledge of everything that so far, you can start to apply that. But there's probably other places you're thinking about AI as well in Operata, I imagine. But
yeah, no, it's a really interesting time, and I think like most businesses, we're still trying to find the most applicable use case and really make it work to our customers' favor, rather than just releasing features for the sake of AI. And I think one of the most pronounced use cases for us is to actually help those who don't have telephony knowledge and perhaps aren't as strong in contact centers to understand what they're looking at and what the next best action is. And so that's been, an early success point for us with AI. So the interpretation of the overall customer and agent experience, and then a recommendation on the next best action for that. And that really speaks to the shift in personas in cloud contact centers as well. You don't always have the crusty old voice engineer like me in your team anymore, right? You've got shared services or cloud services that are now deploying contact centers, which still are, in my opinion, quite specialized in their nature. Customer experience is both an art and a science. And, and I think it's, and so is the art of troubleshooting as well. And so you combine that, you need a kind of specialist skill set. And if you're lacking that from a competitive standpoint, you can really lag behind your competitors who do have the right staff, the right skills, and the right implementation of CX tooling. And so we can use AI to level that field a little, level that playing field, and really help skill up those who aren't versed in contact centers and CX delivery.
That's interesting.
So it's sort of similar application to we've seen in maybe this sort of reporting space where people that aren't data scientists or don't have that kind of background, but you can use AI to say interact conversationally with your data and say what happened in the contact center last week. Did we hit our KPIs? What can we do this week around our scheduling to try and mitigate that? And I guess it's the same. What are the top 3 impacts to our call quality that we can try and do something about?
Yeah, absolutely. Or, what were the key drivers behind, the worst performing customer experiences over the last week? We can then drill down into things like maybe it was aligned to a specific ISP in a specific region, or maybe there was a, subset of IP addresses which were impacted, which clearly show, some sort of a choke point in a specific region in the world. But, again, helping these, our customers to further interpret this and then be able to take meaningful action, I think is really great place for us to start. And we've certainly got some more use cases that are coming up that are in testing at the moment. But this will evolve, and I think just like the story of Operata and our evolution, what we'll continue to do is listen to our customers, and we'll continue to evolve and apply the right tooling where it matters to do the job that's in front of us. But we're on a mission to be the very best in CX observability, and so that's what we're hyper focused on.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It feels quite empowering for agents as well to get closer to that, being able to, through a mixture of what you're doing, but also applying AI to that as well, being able to kind of just not always need a network engineer to help diagnose problems, to be able to vocalize what was just experienced and not necessarily know the right words and the terminology and the language, but just to be able to describe the experience and then through a mixture of telemetry and just AI and knowledge and tooling and all the rest of it, turn that into something actionable. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, it's a good segue, I guess, into the agent experience itself. That's become a really important part of our business, a really important part of our product. And we see the agent as one of the end users of the Operata tool. So we deploy a widget on the agent desktop. It generally floats on top of the soft phone that they're using in whatever agent desktop they happen to have, whether that's custom or out of the box, CCP or Amazon Workspaces or whatever flavor, Salesforce or Zendesk. We apply this Chrome or Edge extension, a little floating widget on their desktop, so they can position it where they want. And we remember the state that it's in, so we remember their preferences and all that. Agent desktops are pretty crowded. You guys know that very well, and finding real estate on there is pretty hard. But we've managed to do that in a way that doesn't impact the agent overall sort of experience. And I guess that is our channel to the agent and their channel back to us. And so we'll notify them of things that are impacting the customer experience that they can do something with in real time. Unlike maybe some of our competitors that are saying your MOS is low, that doesn't help an agent at all. But if we can tell them that, 3:00 every day, your internet seems to dip, perhaps try and have a look if there's somebody else streaming on your network, that's something a little bit more meaningful to them. Or your network's bad, but your customer can still hear you, thumbs up. Or if we detect things like abuse and the agent's being abused, we can pop a help article to them, and we can then enforce business rules like timeouts and that sort of thing. So that's our kind of window to the agent and the agent's window back to us to report issues and also to signal when things aren't going so smoothly. So again, we can use that OODA loop. We can use the orchestration, and we can use the overall actionability of the platform to be able to hopefully make a difference to their day. Pretty hard being an agent, right? Like it's a hard job. So
it is a hard job. And we don't ever talking like on this podcast. We very rarely touch on the business side of actually answering people's questions. Which is also what they have to do. Where there's all these other things as well to manage. So yeah, no, it is. There's a lot going on. We're kind of coming towards the end of time, but I think it'd be good to just talk a bit about Amazon Connect and how Operator works with Connect, because I'm not sure I know the answer to this. Was Operator only ever designed for Connect, or does it also work with other contact centers solutions as well, or like how does that work?
Yeah, so we found market fit with Amazon Connect, and we've got a brilliant relationship with the guys at AWS, and that continues to strengthen every day. And so, it is our leading platform, the one that I would say, a large majority of our customers are on. But we do also support our customers that are using multiple platforms. Operata works across a lot of large enterprise, private, highly regulated industries, government organizations, federal, state level government all around the world. And so a lot of those have complex contact center environments. And so we now support other contact centers where that makes sense for our customers, so they can have a central point of observability across multiple platforms.
Got it.
Yeah, anything sort of in Connect that is upcoming, or any wish list items, for example? I think we quite often find that it would be good to have slightly better API availability for some of the newer features. And anything from your side that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, no, I would say the same. I mean, more programmatic access to all of their features. I'd love to see some more APIs around that contact lens space as well. I think that would be really useful. And also, their auto availability, sort of making it easier to get the data out. I know the guys have done a lot of work around the data lake, which has been really, really beneficial, I think, as a sort of central point of data assembly. So I think they've done a really, really terrific job there. But I hope they continue to invest in liberating the data for all,
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. Wow, there's so much stuff here. I think we could carry on talking all day, but I feel like we should wrap this one up because the time has flown past. Thank you ever so much, John. It's been really, really interesting, and best of luck with what you're doing. Thank you, Alex, as well. And thank you, everyone, for listening. And thank you for joining us to talk all about everything we've been talking about today with Operata. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast player. That way you won't miss it. Whilst you're there, we'd love it if you would rate and review us. And as a new podcast, if you have colleagues that you think would benefit from this content, please let them know. To find out more about how Cloud Interact can help you on your contact center journey, visit cloudinteract.io. We're wrapping this call up now, and we'll connect with you next time.